Good afternoon, guys. This is Coffee with Gaz, where we discuss a question that has been asked by you guys. Okay, so this question was a good question because it gets at a bigger topic, so to speak, and it's not, they're like, I'm not going to answer the question itself, but the question was basically related to a topic where the answers that they were given were often involved what's called moving the goalposts. And what I want to discuss is that concept of moving the goalposts as a red flag for someone who is not interested in presenting you with the truth. They're not true truth seekers. They're not truly scientific in their thought process, and rather they're often presenting you with pseudoscientific or anti-scientific views. So what I mean by moving the goalposts is if you were to challenge someone's position based on maybe certain evidence, what they would do is they'd take their current position and they'd move the goalposts. So they'd actually say, oh, that's true, that might be true, but that's not what I was talking about. I was talking about in this context. So an applied example of that would be what we often see with low carbohydrate diets. Okay, so there are many individuals who believe that there's, like low carbohydrate diets, ketogenic diets are the secret to health. They're the secret to performance, to body composition. It's just the way to go, and carbs and insulin, bad, not good, not for health. Okay, so many individuals hold that position to varying degrees. It would be unfair to say that everyone that likes a low carbohydrate diet holds those positions. That would be totally unfair. I'm impartial in that, I think low carbohydrate diets can work great for health, for body composition, for performance, even in some contexts, but that these people are often overselling. So here's an example of where this moving the goalposts starts to come about. So very often what we'll see in research is that someone will find a particular finding about body composition or health or performance about a low carbohydrate diet, and they will find, non-superiority basically. So what they'll find is that all low carbohydrate diets were basically led to the same outcomes, let's say the same weight loss outcomes as low fat diets in this study, okay, and in multiple studies. So you start to see that coming up and it's like, all right, there seems to be no difference here, and then you present that to the people who have this somewhat ideological or religious stance related to low carbohydrate diets, and you present them with that evidence, and it's like, okay, what do you think? Doesn't this refute your point that you were putting forth? And what they will say is that, oh no, you see, when you look at that study, it was only 6 weeks long, whereas to really become fat adapted and to get the benefits, you need to be at least 8 weeks. And then what happens is an 8-week study comes out, and then you present the same evidence and you're like, hey, look, they did this study again. It was a longer duration, and it seems to be the case that people are still, there's still the same outcomes. And then what they'll say is, oh yeah, but if you look in this study, the low carb group were actually eating 50 grams of carbohydrates, whereas I was talking about when people only eat 30 grams of carbohydrates, okay? And it starts to go forward like that, And you can kind of see how that would come about. That person may be being very genuine. They may indeed be saying that, oh no, there actually is there's only a single circumstance in which I think this intervention would be superior. But I think there's some sleight of hand, some trickery there, where the person is unwilling to let go of their beliefs. And for me, that is a bit of a red flag for someone who is not particularly scientific in their thought process, okay? The same thing comes up in, rehab literature, for example. When we look at interventions related to manual therapy, for example, in the physiotherapy world, what often happens is that, a piece of research will come out and it will say, hey, look, this manual therapy intervention did not seem to lead to the outcomes that everyone's proclaiming, in practice, that all these manual therapy gurus are saying that, oh, this is how I fix my patients, this is an amazing intervention, all my patients get better. And then you look in the research, it's like, oh, this is kind of underwhelming, didn't really do much. And then the person will say, oh well, yeah, but that's because they weren't skilled practitioners. They weren't doing it properly. And it's like, all right, there's something to that. That is fair enough. So then the study gets done again. Then we do it again, and what comes out this time is that, oh, these skilled practitioners who were in the field for 10 years, there was still no positive outcomes. It was still meh. Like the manual therapy intervention didn't seem to do a whole pile. And then what they'll say is, something along the lines of, oh yeah, but if you look at the patient population, these weren't the right patients, I wouldn't actually do it on those patients. And it's like, okay, again, it's fair enough, But when you start to continue presenting these scientific studies and someone is constantly saying, oh no, it's actually different with my patients are unique, or my practice is unique, it starts to bring about a situation whereby they're almost saying that their position is irrefutable, that it's basically not falsifiable, because none of the conditions are, you know, reflective of the specific situation that's not replicable of their own individual situation. So that is a big red flag for sometimes pseudoscience or anti-scientific views, and I would encourage people to at least be aware of it, because it does pop up all of the time in popular culture, you know, in nutrition, in training, in rehab, in medicine, you know, all the time these things come up. And for the public, I often think it can be quite misleading, because it makes the person look like they're more of an expert, because what they end up doing is they say, you know, look at all this stupid research, it's so poorly carried out. If only they were able to replicate what I do in my practice, then we'd see all these positive outcomes. And then they're like, oh yeah, this guy, he's a critical thinker, he seems to be above the research, now I don't have to trust scientists anymore, I should actually just trust this guru. And that's where things become a little bit more troublesome, is where not only is the person, you know, refuting a particular stance, not only are they holding their ideas up really high and trying to make them bulletproof, what they're also doing is making people distrust true experts and the scientific process, the scientific method, and that can lead to some problems when people start to, you know, to have distrust in the medical system, when people are distrusting things like vaccines, you know, really important things for public health. So yeah, basically this is just a video on a very, very nuanced topic of moving the goalposts. But hopefully you guys can think of some examples where that might be relevant. You know, it's relevant when it comes to nutrition for sure. You know, that the low carbohydrate diet example is one of the most like prominent examples of that, you know, because there's been many studies to show that, you know, these low carbohydrate diets, these ketogenic diets, are inferior for endurance performance. But nearly all the time people come out and say, oh no, they just didn't have enough time to be fat adapted. Same in fat loss, same in body composition. And there comes a point where it's like, okay, like, what do you actually want? Do you want people to run 10-year studies in like exactly designed by you for us to be able to refute a certain claim? So yeah, that's that video, guys. Hopefully something useful in there. And as always, drop any further questions you have down below, and I'd be more than happy to discuss them. To be clear, absolutely nothing against low carbohydrate diets. I would say nothing against manual therapy, but to be honest, I think low carbohydrate diets probably have more utility than manual therapy, but such is life. As I said, questions, drop them below. Of course, be happy and remember that it is, in fact, too easy.